We're pleased to talk today with Camille VanDuyn, who's a PR manager for Nintendo. Prior to that, she worked at Sony as a corporate communications manager for PlayStation, and then Symantec before that. Camille graduated from the SOJC in 2009. And I want to start by just asking you, how did you get started? How did you launch your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. And gosh, hearing you say that I graduated in 2009 feels like a really long time ago now. But I will say that the SOJC was really critical to helping me get my first job. And I graduated at a time when we were also in an economic recession. So finding my first job out of college was really challenging, but I participated in the Portland experience at the time. And so completed my last term of college in Portland on that campus and did an unpaid internship with the Oregon Zoo, which actually ended up extending for an additional 6 months after my initial round ended, just given the economic climate. But I stayed in touch with my professors at the SOJC and really tried to network with my fellow classmates until I ended up finding a role at Wagner Edstrom. So I did end up starting my PR career there and worked on the Microsoft account for about 4 years before I made the transition in-house.
Mm-hmm. And had you been interested in the gaming industry always, or is that sort of personal passion?
Very much so. I've been a proud lifelong nerd, and I've been playing Nintendo games in particular since I was probably about 4 years old, and grew up playing with my dad and my 2 younger brothers, and sort of always had this aspirational goal of one day working at Nintendo. And I've always idolized the creator of Super Mario in particular, Mr. Miyamoto, and had this ambition of, well, maybe I could be one of the first female game developers. And as it turns out, as I started my education and got into my career, I learned I was really terrible at math. And so sort of made the pivot to communications, but eventually realized that there are so many paths open to you in the marketing PR field that video games still was a possibility for me, although my mom certainly tried to deter me from that path for a while, sort of thinking, well, maybe there's a more realistic career that you could pursue, but it's always been such a huge passion of mine, so I somehow made it happen.
Well, that's a common story about following your passions. I mean, I'm sure when you were sitting in those initial interviews, for internships and jobs, they were quite struck by how much knowledge you had about their business and their product, right? I mean, you had really I'm sure that gave you a competitive edge.
Absolutely. And because I was so passionate about video games, even when I was working early on in my career on the Microsoft account, I wasn't working on Xbox or anything related to video games, but I always made it a priority to stay up to date on what was happening in the industry and was playing games myself, and used that and tried to amass skills that I thought could eventually help me break into that industry. And then when I had my first interview with Sony for the PlayStation role, it was absolutely beneficial to have that innate knowledge of what was happening in the industry and hands-on experience with those products, really demonstrating that not only did I have the foundational PR skills that they were looking for, but I also knew about the industry and could come in and really hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm. What are the, when you're looking at just the challenges of trying to find work during an economic downturn, what are some of the suggestions you have for students about how to meet that challenge?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, and this is one that I know at least my SOJC professors always hammered home with me, was network, network, network. And you sort of roll your eyes after a while and think, well, everyone says that, but I can't emphasize enough how critical that was for me in so many points in my career. And I've been able to sort of pay that forward. Not only have my network connections been able to help me get a foot in the door at some of the jobs that I've applied for, but I've then in turn been able to reciprocate and help others who I've either met through U of O or in my different roles, get them in the door somewhere else too. So I really can't emphasize enough how important that really is. And the other thing I would say is don't get discouraged and don't be hard on yourself either. In an economic downturn, it is really easy to think, well, I must just not have the right skills, or I must not be doing things right. But it is really hard, just as much for companies to find the right talent and the right fit as it is for you. And I know it's easy to get discouraged, but keep trying and keep thinking of new and creative ways to spiff up your resume and keep yourself engaged and learning during those times. Actually, one of the things that I did in my free time while I was trying to break into the gaming industry was freelance for a small gaming site. And they really didn't have much traffic and weren't a well-known gaming outlet by any means, but it allowed me to keep my writing skills fresh and continue to stay engaged in the industry that I knew I wanted to work in, and just build those skills that I could then again, put onto my resume and further showcase, how passionate I was about the roles that I wanted.
Back in the day, people would use snail mail to send in a resume and a cover letter, and it would sit in someone's physical inbox. Today, there may be, hundreds of other applicants in an electronic inbox, or you may be asked to apply on some blank form with no name, with no idea of who's going to receive it on the other end. Any thoughts about just how students can get their resume and cover letter in front of a decision maker?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, again, being tapping into your network. And even if you have sort of a second degree connection through somebody who might know somebody at a company that you're interested in working in, reaching out and asking if they wouldn't mind making an introduction for an informal coffee chat or something is such a valuable way to get your foot in the door and get on the radar of someone who works at a company that you're interested in. And then another thing that I personally will look at as I'm evaluating candidates, and that I've found to be something that a lot of recruiters are looking at, is what's your social media presence like? I know LinkedIn is probably something that a lot of SOJC professors really emphasize now too, but that for me, I've noticed is becoming a much more critical resource that a lot of hiring managers will look at. And that's a great place to expand a bit on what's on your resume, because at least for me, I'm still of the old school mentality where I generally want to see a resume that's only a page long. If it's more than that, for me, that seems like, they may not, since I'm looking for generally communications roles, I'm looking for conciseness, the ability to clearly communicate a message, who they are, what their skill set is. So LinkedIn is a place where you can expand upon that and really showcase some examples of your work and go into a bit more detail that you may not be able to showcase on a resume.
I want to bring Genevieve in here. Genevieve is a PR major currently at the SOJC. Genevieve, introduce yourself, and I know you have a couple of questions for Camille.
Yeah, my name is Genevieve. I'm a junior. I actually went into college not knowing what I had in mind. I just wanted to go see what was going on. Same with you. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I hated math. And I was like, well, I know I'm not good at math, so I'll go towards my strong suit. And I was better at writing. And a lot of my friends in my sorority actually were in the J school, and they loved it. And they said they had really good classes, really good professors. So I went ahead and took a class, and here we are now. What is your least favorite part of your job, and what is your most favorite part of your job?
Right for the tough question. So the thing that I like about PR is that there are so many different focus areas, right? There's media relations, there's sort of the internal employee communications aspect, there's messaging development, really the writing aspect, which is what I'm personally most passionate about. For me, as funny as this sounds, a lot of my colleagues make fun of me, but my least favorite aspect of public relations is the public facing piece. So really having to be on camera, being a public facing spokesperson, and interfacing with media in that regard has never been my personal passion point. But that said, I certainly have had a lot of opportunities to really hone those skills, and that's helped me be a better coach for executives who are out speaking in public for us or other company representatives. It's helped me hone my writing skills. And so a couple of things that I love most and specific to my current role are getting to be an evangelist for video games. And it comes so much more naturally when you're passionate about whatever it is you're working on. And so getting to tell the story of how a new Mario game is coming to life, or sharing personal stories of things that media or fans have shared with me about how our products have impacted their lives is something that I really cherish and that I hang on to, especially when work gets stressful or particularly challenging. I tap into what it is that we are ultimately doing and the impact that Nintendo is having, on the world, on different people. And that gets me through some of those more challenging experiences.
Awesome. And then, okay, what is your day-to-day work life like? I want to know, do you sit in the office? I know since the pandemic, a lot of people are working at home and working from their laptops, but I wanted to know, what is just like a normal day for you?
Yeah, that is another thing I like about PR is that I wouldn't say there's ever a normal day, but a lot of what I'm working on are kind of split my focus between planning. So getting messaging together, putting together a marketing plan and a media strategy when we have a new product that is getting ready to launch, determining who's the audience that we want to reach, how do we communicate the value proposition of the product, or what makes it fun, should make people excited and interested in buying it. And then really trying to, especially in this COVID world that we're living in, I would almost say it's been a fun challenge that we've been faced with is how do we communicate what our games are all about when people can't get their hands on them? And so traditionally we'll have a lot of events where we demo games for media, or we'll allow consumers to come in and play a game before it's released to really help them understand what makes it special. And we're having to replicate that now in a digital environment where most of the time people can't actually touch the game. So it's been really fun to sort of rethink about how we do PR in this era. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. And then my last question is, what do you think helped you the most to get you where you are today?
I would say my two things, sticking to my passion and thinking about every step of the way. I had sort of a strange career journey to get to video games, having worked in pretty deep tech and then working in cybersecurity to then end up in the gaming industry, but just always remembering what my passion is and remembering that goal and thinking about the skills that I need to eventually get to where I want to be. And so looking at every job opportunity, even if it wasn't something I was particularly passionate or excited about, but looking at that as a growth opportunity and just another way to get me a step closer to where I wanted to be. And then also continuing to maintain my connections with former coworkers and managers and even just checking in with them informally every once in a while, see how they're doing. Again, going back to networking, you never know when somebody might hear about an opening that is a good fit for you, and just making sure you have people who support you and that you remember, where it is that you want to be, and don't be afraid to chase after that, because I can tell you, I never thought ever that I would make it to Nintendo, and I still have to pinch myself sometimes being here, but you can achieve your dreams, as cheesy as that sounds. And so don't ever let anyone try to discourage you or deter you from that.
So do you personally get the games way in advance? And
yeah, I want to know what your favorite game is.
Yes, I am very privileged to get to play a lot of our games, sometimes early. And, as somebody who has to be an expert on the product and speaking about the product, that is one nice perk of the job, is that I get a lot of time to play them, and that helps me better talk about them to fans and to media. And my favorite game of all time, since you asked, is actually Super Mario 64.
Yes.
And the reason for that is I remember booting up that game for the first time, and it was the first 3D game that I had played, and one of the very first 3D games that existed. And I was so in awe of what the developers had done, the music, the sound, the environment. And that was the moment that I decided I am going to work at Nintendo one day. I am going to make it happen. And I've always really cherished that memory. And so that game just has such a special nostalgic place in my heart.
Wow.
Totally.
Well, I'm sure your parents are proud of you now. You knew best. Thank you so much, Camille, for joining us, and also Genevieve. And we will continue to follow your success. And we thank you for spending this really generous time with one of our students and sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And hey, go Ducks.
Go Ducks.
Great. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you both.